Hello, today is Wednesday, May 7th. Welcome to episode 449 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vigna, and I'm joined today by Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, NSI Senior Fellow Matt Hayden, and NSI Fellow Jessica Jones. So, team, today, Wednesday, May 7th, we are kicking off Conclave in Vatican City. Conclave, of course, is the process by which 133 cardinals will elect a new pontiff. Of course, Pope Francis passed last month, and now is the time in which all of the cardinals will join together in secret. They have had their cell phones and communication devices confiscated, and they will go into the Sistine Chapel and cast their ballots for the next pope. This is an incredibly sacred process. About 1.4 billion Catholics across the world. This is probably the second, if Catholicism was a country, it would be the second largest country in the world. So this is no small matter that we are discussing here. And we've seen popes in the past. Of course, Pope John Paul II is revered by Catholics, across the world as sort of the model for which Catholics believe a pope should stand in. We've seen, Francis in particular weigh into very meaty security issues affecting conflicts across the globe. And so in many ways, not only is the Pope the spiritual leader of the Catholic faith, but he also has considerable influence among his flock when it comes to how he approaches conflict across the world and suffering. So with that said, Les, I'm going to turn to you first. How do you feel about Conclave? What does this mean to you? And what do you expect coming from this process?
Well, it's fascinating on a lot of levels, theologically, politically. In our little zone of international relations, there are implications. I love this candidate, Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, who is the Cardinal of Jerusalem. He's offered himself as a replacement for hostages taken by Hamas and in other areas. He's a very interesting fellow. Terrific name. You wonder what his Pope name might be if he wins. It's obviously hugely significant. There's 1.4 billion Catholics in the world. It's an incredibly diverse group of people. We could see, a pontiff from North America. That would be something. We could see another pontiff from the global south. That would also be notable. But I think more importantly is the kind of theological direction. Pope Francis, who was kind of a champion in some ways for progressives, was also pretty good on traditional values for the Catholic Church. So there's a lot of subtlety here, a lot of nuance. It's terrifically interesting. And while these guys go, these cardinals, the 133 cardinals or whatever, go into the Sistine Chapel in secret and have these debates and kind of maneuvering to see who the next pope is going to be. Everyone is watching them. All of the networks are poised outside, looking for the smoke, whether it's black smoke because they didn't agree on something, or white smoke because they've elected a new pope. It's amazing. It's fun to watch. It has implications around the globe. So I think excellent topic today. I'm rooting for Pizzaballa.
Great, Jess.
I think like many folks, watching Conclave, if Les didn't give you like excitement over the process, if you just watch that movie, the insight and the kind of the maneuvering that goes inside the Conclave, like Les pointed out, is super interesting and a fascinating insight. To your right, what some of Les said, in addition to, being a spiritual leader, the Pope, the Vatican maintains, diplomatic relations with over 180 countries, right? So by its very nature, it is forced to operate within the geopolitical world. It has to deal with heads of state, conflict. You see the Pope and its other officials already involved in negotiations when it comes to Ukraine and other conflicts around the world. So it plays a really important role, even if we don't talk about it that much, and it's a bit quiet. So it'll be interesting to see whether a new Pope but either kind of moves forward in those negotiations and it has a more active diplomatic face, or if it recedes a little and is a little bit more behind the scenes. As Les pointed out, we don't really know where the new pope's going to come from, but growing Catholic base is across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and it's receding in Europe and in North America a bit. So it'll be interesting to see whether the new pope comes from one of those areas and what shift that might bring in terms of kind of the issues that the church kind of pushes forward. Les talked, we can use progressive, however we want to use that in terms of the Catholic Church. Francis was seen that way, and whether issues like social justice, climate, poverty, whether those continue to be a champion of the next pope will be interesting. And what if that puts that at odds with other countries that have different, kind of priorities when it comes to the faith. So I think that'll be interesting. And I think, we can see whether it's progressive versus kind of conservative, traditional, that kind of ideological battle across, it's not just the Vatican, right? You see it across the world really, and where those blocks arise and whether a more conservative pope would kind of align with, countries like we see a potential pope coming from, Hungary, for example, or whether someone who's a little more progressive. So it'll be interesting to see how the implications for the future of geopolitics.
Thanks, Jess. Matt?
So, we also have the opportunity that this is a Jubilee year. And so you have, every 25 years, a pilgrimage of most Catholics to the Vatican to celebrate. And so it's kind of a larger than life moment already on its own, but landing on that every 25-year anniversary is something special. We're also looking at as everyone has already noted, that the Pope has a say and a voice in almost everything, whether it be traditional social politics all the way up to national security. Where we see something potential with this conclave is that we have candidates, less disfavored and others that are in their 60s. So we have seen popes come in at a very older age in the past. If we get someone that is in their 60s, we could have this individual as pope for nearly 25 years. If history is a guide. And so watching the tea leaves of who gets selected may give a perspective of who and the direction of the church is going to show for decades to come, as opposed to, maybe a decade plus. And so this has the opportunity for the church to have a consistent voice and a strict direction that candidly could be counted on through the 2040 generation, which is hard to even imagine.
Yep. So for my part, I look back on Francis's legacy, and he really is one of a kind in the sense that he was the first Jesuit pope. He was the first pope from Latin America, the global south, and he was the first Francis. Of course, he took the name after Saint Francis of Assisi. Pope Francis, of course, as I mentioned, is from the Jesuit order, and I think his approach really does demonstrate a detachment. His approach to religion really does reflect a detachment from, the goods of the world. He took this oath of voluntary poverty. He was a man of deep prayer and discernment of God's will. He felt it was very important to listen to God for guidance. And I think I'll be really interested to see how the next pope sort of approaches his spirituality and his approach to his communication with God, and how that is reflected in how he preaches to the 1.4 billion Catholics across the world. I will say, in terms of Vatican governance, I'll be really interested to see how the church approaches the engagement of religion, particularly Catholicism, in closed or oppressive countries. I think the approach to China in particular was, under Pope Francis, was particularly problematic, where the Vatican sort of cut a deal with the CCP, where they would sort of co-manage the church. And, I think, there was already a church underground, so to speak. And this sort of reflects could be argued as a selling out of the Catholic faith. I would also argue that I think the next pope will have to deal with the crisis in Germany, particularly, where we're seeing a loss of Catholics leaving the church in droves. Of course, they have their own challenges when it comes to governance and how the church is being managed there. So I think there are a lot of challenges that are also percolating under the radar, in addition to the ones that we're already seeing. So with that said, yes, Les?
I want to add one final note.
Yes.
So everyone's watching this thing from the outside. There are no cameras in the Sistine Chapel watching the vote. The cardinals have to get 2/3. Whoever wins has to get 2/3 of the vote. That's 89 votes. That's hard to do. It's easier because there's no camera in there. We ought to think about this for C-SPAN in the House and the Senate. Maybe it's time to move on from the C-SPAN era. If you can put people in a closed room without any cameras in there and get them to come to an agreement on something as difficult as picking the next pope, maybe there's a lesson we can learn here.
Or it goes the opposite way and the total lack of transparency.
I don't want votes to be in secret. I want votes to be fully transparent.
Yeah, let's
talking about.
All right. Well, you know, look what you get.
Yeah. Democracy. So that is a wrap.
Doing
Thanks
really
so much
well.
to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, May 9th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.